Hi, I'm Anna. This crew might know me better as at Writers Writing. So I want to talk to you about a word that you may be new to you. It's pronounced pathways. So everyone with me, Okay, I'm kidding, obviously. Pathways showed up in 48 of our 70 sessions at DML this year, and it's a word that's important to our community for many reasons. One of those reasons is that the ways that pathways to learning have existed in our educational systems, and the ways that learning has been imagined in our wider culture as predetermined and destination-focused, and there's one way and one pathway to learning. The great artist and educational thinker Nick Susanis argues that not only has the factory model persisted in our imagination of education, but reforms often only contribute to the existing monolith machine for producing predetermined outcomes. So I thought we could take a moment today to reflect on our efforts to engage learner voice, to create alternative pathways, while asking ourselves the critical question: how alternative are the new pathways to learning? There are more, but are they any less predetermined and focused on a destination? I began to be interested in shifting my focus from pathways to learning pathways in my research with 4 young men who were developing as writers in school, outside of school, and online. In this research, over 2 years' time, I traced several aspects of their writing practices, from the technologies they were using to their purposes and craft techniques for the writing. I also analyzed the dynamics of change, and is this even showing up? Oh, good. The dynamics of change to those practices, and I was looking to see how their learning pathways were taking shape. One dynamic that became really critical was something I was calling crystallizing moments. And these were unpredictable moments in the young men's experiences that seemed to be frozen in their memory and which produced a myriad of changes to them when the young men reminisced upon them. For David, it was a moment when in a cafeteria when his friend said, "Your writing sounds all the same." He had been writing what he called later vague, repetitive rants on the need for youth voice. And the next day, he sat down to prove his friend wrong and created a multilingual piece. He worked to prove his friend wrong for over a year's time, and he created hybrid pieces with images. He began to do collaborations with hip-hop artists, and he began to curate as a form of composition and have diversified messages. After a mentor compared Patrick to a poet, Patrick Googled him, and this moment crystallized for him. He began to aspire to be more like the poet Komanyaka, and he took up the practice of extensive reading and annotation to learn. Annotation was a skill he learned in school, but he didn't use it there. He used it for his own purposes. He also began to look for where page poets were in his community. He wrote this piece as he went to an independently owned coffee shop for the first time and watched writers at work, and he eventually wrote his own book. So like Patrick, each of the young men used practices that were made available in school, in out-of-school organizations, and outside of school and online as resources to meet the new purposes for writing that grew from these crystallizing moments. Mike was a master of commandeering space at an out-of-school organization. Whenever there wasn't a workshop going on, he would somehow find out, reach out via social networks, and call together fellow teens and replicated the workshops for themselves. In struggling with expectations of gender, race, and writing, as an only boy in an advanced English class, and in his composition of hip-hop, Dan began to create digital ciphers on Facebook, which afforded him a platform with access to people in both those contexts. These young men remind us that pathways emerge. They emerge in response to the social, cultural, and situational demands and tensions of the multiple contexts in which youth are learning. And yet, there are certain dynamics, like crystallizing moments and others, which we could begin to pay attention to. Youth are principal in shaping their learning pathways. We often talk about learners with reactive language rather than positioning them as meaning makers. Whether we can articulate them or not, as learners, we have goals that we use to interpret and respond to our learning opportunities. Again, I turn to Nick to think about how pathways can both emerge and be forged. And his work helps remind me that experiences are both accidental and sought out. Practices branch out, and we and our goals are transformed in that process. I've been influenced by these young men in my work in designing learning opportunities to design for possibility, not outcome, and to listen even more closely to the ways that learners are forging their pathways across these opportunities. In addition to the new alternative pathways to learning, like so many at DML this year have called us to do, I encourage us to imagine the possible and always co-constructed nature of learning pathways, and to ask ourselves some critical questions. Where, when, and with whom do we locate learning? Where and when and what type of learning opportunities are being made available as resources and to whom? And how responsive are our learning environments to the learning processes that are currently taking shape? Thank you.